This was quite unusual to me, but normally we're dealing with the literature with different point of views, and these books are very instrumental to understand, to explain students the areas of internet regulation. Therefore, these new books present interest in providing students understanding of how law tackles.
Akbar, thank you for agreeing for this interview. And the first question is, what one book played a special role in your professional development most?
Thank you very much. So, you must be aware, I'm interested in the internet law, so the way how internet is impacted the social development into the legal regulation. So therefore, that are two books which are we normally recommend to students, that Information Technology Law of Ender Murray, Information Technology Law by Ian Lloyd. Well, by time being they were interesting how they both were Oxford University Press, and they were interesting how to see how new editions are coming of these books. And after a while, actually, Ian Lloyd became new editions were coming, and Andrew Murray was a little late with this. But overall, the way fascinates that the way how they illustrate the areas that law impacting the society, impacting the internet regulation, because we know everything goes online nowadays, and this actually gives enormous of convenience, but also at the same time also presents some threats, some issues. So it used illegal purposes, or in general some aspects, let's say they're going online and there's no let's say understanding of how it needs to be tackled, needs to be regulated, and therefore these two books was very good in showing that areas that actually impacted the law, impacting the society. Of course, there's not all the areas, yeah, but some areas are actually important and needs to be regulated. And also, from theoretical perspective, there's many views on how it needs to be regulated. There are certain schools up here in this area. For example, famous Joel Reinderberg with his Lex Informatica, saying that, and his views was quite appealing to me at that time, and influenced it in my research, telling that internet needs to be regulated by the network itself. That causes lots of repercussion. And later on, there's a new school up here of the Lawrence Lessig that's saying that there are a number of modalities that the internet can be regulated. So, and what actually was interesting in Murray itself, that he's proposing it itself, so its own module of the regulation. And this was quite unusual to me, but normally we're dealing with the literature with different point of views, and the idea that you can come up with your own position on that, on the doctrine, on the about regulation, that it was interesting to me. So Murray coming up with this, and I don't know to what extent it's being popular, become the same popular as, let's say, Murray's the idea of lexics modalities, or ideas of Reinderberg's Lex Informatica, but the whole idea that person can come up with his own, let's say, approach to the problem also fascinates me. Right.
May I ask, what makes these two books very useful for white students, especially who studies law?
Absolutely. So these books are very instrumental to understand, to explain students the areas of internet regulation that present special interest for commercial law, because, for example, online contracting, that's something we deal with daily, also area of online defamation, and areas of internet privacy, data protection, that's becoming more and more prominent. And these books touch on some of the areas that basically newer developments, like in social networks, these activities of defamation and privacy protection in social networks, and so forth. And beyond of it, there are also views on the intellectual property protection online. So how we need to protect inventions, utility models, designs online, and also how we need to protect copyright, because copyrights all existent in online, in internet. So they're quite useful views, but also insight on the law, so which particular provision can be applicable, because English law is quite old, we know that, and the way how it can adapt into online environment, this is also was one of the part of the challenge. And in comparing to US law, it's being a little slow in adapted newer challenges and in regulation. Therefore, these editions, these new books present interest in providing students understanding of how law tackles the online challenges and with new developments of e-fication. Yeah.
So you mentioned internet law. So what do you think, based on these books, is internet law is evolving very fast compared to other areas in the law area?
Absolutely. So nowadays there are actually regulation not covering all online relations, but only some of them, and therefore some scholars coming with the view that the regulation is fragmentary. Yeah. So, but nevertheless, you can see that this is emerging because at the earlier times there was idea that it's not subject to regulation at all, and by time being it's. So all of this are being understood as misconceptions. So nowadays, and more regulation intervening. But at the same time, some other problems appear. For example, often technology is replacing legal regulation in terms of adopting practices that are not in line with the law, and if they needs to be, everything needs to be compliant with the law. But the question is which law? For example, because internet relations are transcontinental, and but the law is territorial. So there are many problems like jurisdiction, applicable law. So and therefore there's David Post was saying that the people will able to choose the law in terms of a switch from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, which can be to a certain extent true with some relations, but let's say in some other relations it's not really, because the person always, no matter to where the person online, he's always physically in some jurisdiction. Yeah, therefore, this is also causing misconceptions. Yeah.
So my next question is regarding Uzbekistan. Do you see some points mentioned in the book also applicable to Uzbekistan, and how they are different from the areas mentioned in US or UK?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, so because many findings in the research are totally applicable to Uzbekistan, because we are evolving quite fast in that areas. But nevertheless, sometimes they are not really aligned with the doctrine in terms of, for example, information considered to be property, but property normally exclusive possession, and for example, it's really hard to guarantee, let's say, the confidence of the information unless it's a secret. And so I think there are huge developments going on, but I think in terms of how they align with the doctrine, I think this is something needs to be done in that area. So, but nevertheless, we did in doing a lot in this area, because, for example, law about privacy, which is called personal information in our jurisdiction, has been adopted. And these principles are quite a carbon copy of the European data protection regulation, which can be marked as a progress towards the regulation of this area. Yeah.
That's quite interesting. So which other books will you also recommend for students for professional development?
Yes, yeah, perhaps from the other areas, that's from Rudolf Dolzer and Christoph Schur. That's Principle of International Investment Law. That's a new kind of a relatively a new emerging area of law that's normally concerned with the international investment protection in some other states, in other jurisdiction. So what this book is was specifically helpful to students, because they clearly outline the ideas and principles, because the area of law is quite in the state of flux, it's under formation. But the way how authors could add clarity in it, could explain and clearly set the principles that are actually fascinating. And maybe not least because of authors are professional lawyers and arbitrators, which could be comparable with the book of Sornaraja about international investment law from University of Singapore. That actually provide a different perspective. There are lots of case studies, lots of examples, but however the opposite of that book of Dolzer and Schuer. But therefore, I'm first of all recommend to students to look at the Dolzer Schuer first of all, to understand the area of law, and then in order to have specific examples, look at the Sornaraja of international investment law.
Thank you. So our students also quite like to read books on recreational purposes. So which one is your favorite?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say, I mean, recreational purposes books, they maybe still legal aspects. Therefore, yeah, so some of the not clearly like subject books, but quite interesting. I would recommend to read Code of Lawrence Lessig. Basically, very famous law professor, and I met him also in Stanford University. He was interested in this idea of internet regulation, and you see, there are many examples in there how law tries to regulate technology in the past, and how law tries to cope with the internet developments in the future. Yeah, so and in every that wave, you can see the wave of that development coming from the typographic machines, and then goes with the recordings of the videos, and then ended up with the peer-to-peer file sharing networks that quite problem nowadays. So all of this, so you can see the similarity of the problems, and how law dealing with that sometimes, and how you can see the difference how technology deal with it and how law deal with it, and there are irreconcilable differences in there that certainly actually present interest to students to see.
Thank you very much for interesting insights on your favorite books. And we'll be glad to see you again in our next video.
Sure, absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you.